The Boy from Bricktown, a memory. Growing up in the early 70s and 80s was quite an experience. I was born in Point Pleasant Hospital, which is now condominiums and a riverfront park. It seems the older you get, the more things disappear and change. It's just the way of life. My earliest memory is actually of my father wearing a red velour shirt and blue jeans and shaving at the sink. To this day, even though he's been gone for nearly 24 years, he is the best man that I've ever known. The kind of guy who'll give you $20 even if it was his last 20. The kind of guy, and he was a pharmacist, that would go open up the pharmacy at night and fill an emergency prescription if somebody needed it. Those days are long gone, and men like him seem few and far between. My mother was a teacher at Pointborough High School, and she decorated the house for every season. My love of fall is because of her. I have 2 older brothers, and we spent a lot of our youth getting through St. Dominic's School, having fun with our friends, playing epic wiffle ball games with our friends, on our street in front of our house, until the streetlights came on, or it was dinner time. Those games seemed to go on forever. Every day back then seemed like forever. A few houses down from us on Roosevelt Drive was this nice little patch of woods. It was fun running in there and playing, and of course years later, 2 houses replaced that little bit of woods. This was a terrible pattern that continues to this day as I've watched more and more of the Jersey Shore become overpopulated throughout the years. More trees and more woods have become obliterated, and I always felt bad for the animals who just lived there and did absolutely nothing to deserve having their homes taken away from them. We swam at Manasquan Beach during the days in the summer and hit up the Squan Tavern for their amazing pizza at night, along with walking Point Pleasant Boardwalk. I guess my memories are not too different than a lot of you who grew up in Bricktown, but when I was a kid, there were no cell phones. I just remember playing with my friends in their backyards, using walkie-talkies, or CBs as they were known. We bought them cheap at Kmart. A matter of fact, Kmart seemed to have everything back then, including toys, VHS tapes, and those old plastic Halloween masks, not to mention the blue light specials. A friend of mine and I would always get in trouble for misbehaving in Kmart, running into the toy section and throwing things around. It got so bad that we would walk in, the security lady would point at us, and we'd have to turn around and leave. Part of being young is just being stupid. It goes with the territory, in fact. In the same plaza where Kmart was a wonderful deli called Denny's, which later became Cohen's. There was also a Baskin-Robbins ice cream, Karen's Curtains, and a huge Pathmark. Up the block from my old house in Roosevelt, on the left side, was a stationery store, Benny's Meat Market, and Shore Pharmacy. Now, some years later, Shore Pharmacy would move across the street, across Route 88, and I would work there in my teen years when I was in high school. Right next door to Shore Pharmacy was Friedman's Bakery, which had the best bagels and cakes that you can imagine. And most of the customers there would get their bagels or coffee in the morning, and then they would come over to Shore Pharmacy, especially on Sundays, get their newspapers, which we came in early to put together, and they would get all their lottery tickets and gab and talk and joke around, pretty much see the same people for years. Well, that pharmacy, that bakery, the meat market across the street, the stationery store as well, they've been gone a long time. Over the years, in different places in town, I would catch a glimpse of some of those old-timers who used to come to the lottery machine at Shore Pharmacy, and then I wouldn't see anyone for a number of years. Then, surprisingly, in 2026, I actually saw a guy who used to come to the lottery machine all the time. I thought he was in his 70s then, and that was in the 80s. My God, he was probably the age I am now. Going back to Roosevelt Drive, it seems I experienced everything there. My first kiss, my first snowball fight, and my first real game of manhunt. Out in the street in front of our house, we not only played wiffle ball, but hockey and touch football. My brothers and I and our friends would also trek to Arrowhead Park with our mitts, bats, and balls and have endless batting practices on the baseball field. On the way back, we would treat ourselves to 7-Eleven right off Route 88. Slurpees were amazing back then, as were the cupcakes and the fruit pies, and we never gained a pound because we were so active. Boy, I miss that metabolism now. Heck, I even remember how incredible it was when the big gulps came along, and I loved Chocodiles, which were pretty much chocolate-covered Twinkies, and no, they are not the same thing today. I remember riding my bike off Roosevelt Drive for the very first time and how much bigger the world seemed. I remember taking long walks down Route 88 with my brothers in the winters with our sleds so we could sled down Kmart Hill, which was right behind Kmart. God, it was dangerous. But we did it anyway. I remember my dad got a new car, and it was a red Monte Carlo, and the first time I saw it is when he picked me and my brothers up at Arrowhead Park one afternoon. I remember the amazing dinners my mother made at night for us all, and all of us sitting around the table, my father, my mother, and my two brothers, and the laughter. I remember seeing Star Wars at the old Music Makers Theater in Brick back in the old Kennedy Mall shopping plaza. The movies were a magical place back then, before the days of streaming. There was also another 2 theater in Brick and a Circle Cinema. That Circle Cinema is now an IHOP. The other 2 theaters are no longer there. Nor is the Laurelton Circle, where I first heard the word traffic. But there were a lot of other special times. I would gather with my family at a little bungalow behind Visitation Church off Maniloking Road in the summers. They were very special times, and I can still see so many faces of so many people in the family that are long gone. And I should also mention there was a 4th movie theater off Route 88 in Brick, actually where the Walmart is right now. It was a drive-in theater. I saw my first movie there, Bambi. I remember pitching a winning season in minor league in 1984 for the Angels. Rudy Frank was the best coach ever. And I will never forget the parents that came to see the games, who cheered us on, who had so many parties for us after we won. After that, I never got involved with sports again. I guess I liked the idea of going out a winner. You don't get to do that too many times in life. Growing up in the 70s and 80s was indeed special in Bricktown. And for years afterwards, you would walk around town and you would recognize people. And they would recognize you. And then when time went on in the 90s, and I remember walking up and down Route 88, you saw less and less people that you knew. And life seemed to get a little more bittersweet. And then in the 2000s, you recognized no one. It's amazing how the 70s and 80s could be so long ago, and yet it's still so fresh in my mind. And some places are still standing, like that 7-Eleven on Route 88 and the Arrowhead Inn next door. Yeah, they both seem like a testament to time now. But back then, when you remember growing up, you felt like you could do anything. You felt that good would always triumph over evil, and that there was an adventure waiting for you around every corner. It was in those days you really started to get a taste of what life was like. And not all of it is pleasant. I remember a kid we grew up with was killed on his bike on Route 70 and never made it to the 80s. The first girl I kissed would tragically die of a heart problem in her early 20s. You would watch people in your neighborhood move off or die. I'm in my mid-50s now, but I often return to my memories, sometimes too much. I think it's to remember the way I was, or to remember the things I believed, or to remember feeling strong feelings for the first time. I might be 54 now, but often I still feel like the boy from Bricktown.